So, if you haven't guessed, I'm British. But in more detail, I'm actually from England. So I'd say I'm pretty qualified to ask the question, what the actual is going on with the UK? So let's break down some of the biggest issues that currently plague the UK in its current era. I'm pretty sure none of you guys watching this are going to be shocked by some of these subjects, considering it's pretty much all we talk about over here right now. From the government to speech suppression to the big no-no, illegal immigration. Anyone that lives in the normal world, i.e. working class and the middle classes, if they even exist anymore, cannot stop talking about these issues. But why? Well, because they f***ing matter. In spite of what most of Brighton thinks anyway. But for the Americans, Brighton is basically the San Francisco of the UK. So anyway, let's discuss what is going on with the UK. So one of the biggest stories currently in the UK is the case of Lucy Connelly, the woman who has been sentenced to 31 months in prison for saying what could be perceived as an offensive tweet on X. In the name of clarity, this is the whole tweet. Mass deportation now. Set fire to all the fucking hotels full of their b****s for all I care. While you're at it, take the treacherous government and politicians with them. I feel physically sick knowing what these families will now have to endure. If that makes me rage, then so be it. So the big question is, why did she get arrested for this tweet specifically? Well, the wording of the charge is inciting racial hatred. This was due to the set fire part of the tweet apparently. The thing is, this tweet was in direct response to one of the most brutal terrorist motivated murders committed in the UK in recent memory, the Southport killer case, which is where an 18-year-old man stabbed 3 young girls aged 9, 7 and 6 and seriously wounded 8 other children and 2 adults. This attack was solely in the name of extreme Islamic terrorism. He even downloaded the Al Qaeda manual back in the COVID lockdown. Although Axel was in fact born in Cardiff, Wales, and was later radicalised into his teenage years, it does directly correlate to the issue of illegal immigration, as the thought process goes that we didn't know who is coming into the country, from religion to race to background and ultimately criminal record. Now I have a whole section coming up on illegal immigration, so hold your horses, partner. So back to the lack of free speech. It's pretty much memed about at this point. So going back to one of the OG cases from 2016, which was the upload of the nasty pug video where it showed Mark Meakin, or Count Dankula, teaching his girlfriend's pug to be what appeared to be a certain wartime German gesture. It was clearly a joke. Unless you were the police in the UK, then it becomes a defiance against the Communication Act of 2003. Mark was actually charged for this and was ordered to pay £800 in fines, but instead donated the money to a children's charity as a bit of a fuck you to the cause. He raised 100 grand to fight the case legally until it was rejected due to the nature of the crime apparently. In the end, the court seized the money from his bank account and Mark continues to rally for freedom of speech in the UK and also here on YouTube with his channel Count Dankula 2, as his first account was demonetized because of course it was. So the policing of the internet opinion pandemic is absolutely in full swing in the UK, with people being arrested and charged for controversial opinions on a weekly basis. Of course these people always seem to be on one side of the political swing, right? Well yeah, most of the offenders seem to hold right-wing beliefs, and usually the posts are about racial issues or immigration. And the well-known problem in the UK about the Islamic run gangs that has been an ongoing issue for a long time now. So rather than the police clamping down on those issues, they would rather silence voices talking about them. Funny that, isn't it? Almost like there was an agenda within the police force. The lack of free speech in the UK has made its way to America, even prompting a response from President Trump in way of sending over a task force to look at the problem over here, and especially keep an eye on the Lucy Connelly case. And before we get too wrapped up in the government currently running the UK into a more and more dire situation day by day, let's ask, what needs to be changed about freedom of speech? Well, firstly, you should be able to express an opinion from the comfort of your own home without the fear of literally being arrested. I think that if you invoke violence on somebody or a group of people, then of course it should be investigated. But honestly, in the case of Lucy Connelly, a 41-year-old childminder, what is the risk here? Did the police truly believe that she was a direct threat to a group of illegal immigrants that currently reside in 5-star hotels across the country? No. There is a difference between a radical Islamic extremist on Twitter, which by the way only get their accounts suspended rather than being arrested apparently, and a middle-aged mum that tweets a bit of an edgy opinion. The UK is not a place for true free speech, and to the rest of the world we are a laughing stock for it. Keir Starmer is the fastest falling in popularity Prime Minister in history. His favourability went from 62% to only 45% in just the month of May, after the disastrous first quarter this country has had under the new Labour government. I find it so hard to believe that there are any Labour voters even left. In fact, in my day-to-day life, I couldn't name a single person that looks favourably upon Labour anymore, and it really isn't hard to see why. It seems like Labour have purposely gone out of their way to piss off as many people in the general public they possibly can, attacking the working class, farmers, pensioners, people on benefits, and even the rich. I think the only ones they haven't annoyed are the people that turn up on small boats on the shores of Dover. Anyway, why does everyone hate Sir Keir? Sickening that he's a Sir. Well, here's a few reasons. One of the first announcements they made was a cut to the winter fuel allowance, which is a payment that pensioners usually get to help with their energy bills in the winter. This went down like a lead balloon, of course. It was supposed to save the government £1.5 billion at the peril of some of the most vulnerable people in society. Great move. Secondly, the disability benefit reductions. Labour introduced £5 billion in cuts to disability benefits, affecting approximately 800,000 individuals. Various critics argue that these cuts could push at least 300,000 people into poverty, including 50,000 children. Another example, the big inheritance tax on farmland, one of the most controversial moves made by the Labour government this year. It was a change to the inheritance tax on farmland. Previously, agricultural land could be passed down free of inheritance tax under agricultural property relief, which was meant to protect family farms. This shift has caused uproar in the farmer community, with the National Farmers Union warning that over 60% of farms could be hit by hefty tax bills, putting the future of many family-run farms at risk and ultimately food supply directly from the UK. They also faced backlash for refusing to compensate women born in the 1950s affected by changes to the state pension age. Despite previous Labour support for the Women Against State Pension Equality campaign, the decision to forego a £10.5 billion compensation package was seen as a betrayal by many, including members within the Labour Party. Honestly, you wouldn't trust this government to tell you the colour of the sky at this point, and it's hard for anyone to argue for them anymore. The only response you see from Labour about any problem is that they inherited it from the last government, meaning the Conservative Party, who were in power for 14 years prior. I mean, they certainly had their good and their bad moments, but I just find it hard to believe that things could be any worse than they are today. What's happened in the world of UK politics is kind of unheard of. A third horse has entered the race and is coming up from behind and about to take the win from under Keir's feet, and they are the Reform Party, the so-called voice of the working man. This party is pretty much faced by Nigel Farage, also the controversial face of Brexit. Whatever your opinion you have on that, but one thing that is completely undeniable is that Nigel and the Reform Party are incredibly popular, with the movement growing every single day, winning countless polls and dominating certain counties and regions. I think what's happened is that the Reform Party now does represent the right wing and maybe even more centred views, as they aren't afraid to talk about the issues that Labour so desperately tries to avoid, like the mass illegal immigration that has now been seen to have allowed up to 1,000 people, mostly young men, entering the country on a daily basis. Since Reform has been vocal about some of these issues, we have seen a slight turnaround in the Labour voices, essentially echoing what the Reform Party is saying, and it is by far the popular opinion. Usual lip service from this Labour government. There was even a petition that was calling for another general election that garnered over 3 million signatures, but unfortunately it was dismissed. Whether you voted Labour or not, it is undeniable that this government has let down the general public in a huge way. I can see huge changes coming in the ever-shifting world and in the coming years. I would even say for the better, because you know, how could it possibly get any worse? Famous last words, right? Now for the fun subject, the hot topic of the decade right now in the UK. If you haven't heard, in every single possible way, there are thousands of illegal migrants crossing the English Channel to enter the country, and they are being greeted at our shores and taken in for processing, which at the moment is being comprised of taking them to a processing centre, which is usually massive compounds they use to try and find out who they are and where they're from. And after that process, or sometimes skipping that part, they are then led to some temporary accommodation But what kind of accommodation, you ask? Well, pretty much anything you can think of at this point. 5-star hotels, B&Bs, motels, and even f***ing castles. Yes, castles. Don't worry, I'll explain that one to you later. So what's the issue? Aren't they just desperately seeking refuge from their war-torn countries and heading over to our once wonderful country to live out their better life? Well, kind of, but also not really. What I mean is, a lot of these migrants are coming from countries that aren't even at war. For instance, in 2022, Albanians were the leading nationality heading over to this country on small boats. From that point on in the following years, the top immigrants coming over were from Iran, Afghanistan and Iraq. But then we also had some other countries like Vietnam, Turkey, Egypt, India, Kuwait that don't pose a significant risk being in their native countries. The worrying statistic is that the people coming over in the larger droves are from war-torn, more extremist religious countries and may not completely align with the Western or British way of thinking, and instead favour a more Middle Eastern Islamic way of thinking. And also the demographic of person that is overwhelmingly crossing are young men from the ages of 18 to 24, or of fighting age as some people do put it. There is a question you have to ask yourself. If the conditions are so dreadful and dangerous, then why would you, as a man, leave your entire family behind? It just doesn't add up, honestly. Another question is, why do these people cross through the entirety of Europe and all of the other European countries and then continue to risk their lives crossing choppy waters to finally reach our shores? The answer is the asylum seeker status. I know what you're saying right now. Illegal immigrants aren't entitled to anything under UK law, and you'd be right technically. But did you know that you are equally entitled to everything you would do being an asylum seeker while they're actually processing your application to become one, so to speak? In other words, you are an asylum seeker until proven otherwise. This means you're entitled to a minimum of £49.18 per week per person and housing accommodation. Also, you're entitled to free NHS healthcare, including GP and hospital treatment, prescriptions, dental and eye care, which by the way is not free for the majority of the UK. So onto mental health services. Children aged 5 to 6 have the right to attend state schools for free and free school meals every day, and they're even offered free legal advice under legal aid, and now there are even reports of free driving lessons and paid translators. This is all part of the Section 4, which is where it outlines what you could get as soon as you land on the shores of Britain. So how long does this last for, this Section 4 help? Well, the truth is, as long as they need it, meaning forever pretty much. So can you see how this is pretty much a major problem for the British economy, as well as many other problems this could throw up, like cultural integration for instance. Economically, the numbers reported by Parliament on their official website equates to a cost to the taxpayer of £14.4 billion per year. Just for a comparison, that is 10% of the entire budget for the NHS. That number is without considering the hundreds of millions being spent on the third-party associations that work in conjunction with illegal migration, like legal services and immigration enforcement costs. Insane, honestly. So another concern plaguing the British people is integration. All immigration isn't a bad thing. In fact, famously, during the 70s through to the 90s, legal immigration has worked pretty well, with numbers of 72,000 per year on average in the 70s and 54,000 through to the 80s, and a majority of these migrants were from the Commonwealth countries. So what's so different about it today? Well, I believe there are two major reasons us Brits are getting our nose out of joint. The first reason is the numbers. Last year in 2024 there were 36,816 small boat crossings, with an average of 53 people on a singular boat, and that's according to figures from gov.uk. Doing some estimations, that has the potential to mean that in the UK up to 1,951,248 illegal immigrants have entered the UK via small boat alone. So can you see how impactful this can be to the way the country will have to be run, meaning that they will all have an expectation of receiving money and housing by the British government. The second problem that these numbers can cause is the ability for such a population to be injected into a culture that isn't their own can cause social friction. For example, the vast majority of these immigrants are from Islamic backgrounds, meaning that their ideologies are completely different to the general public. Perhaps they disagree with a certain female rights, or they have conflicting opinions on the LGBT community, or in the worst case, they have extreme opinions on the Western culture in general and believe that Sharia law is the only true law. These kind of thoughts do not comply with the laws of the land in Britain, and some parts of the Islamic community do in fact hold this belief and have decided to bypass the British law institution by opening their own courts of law that hold the belief that Sharia law is the only true law. Just to be clear on what that could mean, in Sharia law, You could have your hand lawfully amputated for stealing, or have your daughter married at the ripe old age of 9 years old. And the best part, you would get the death penalty for apostasy or the renouncing of the Muslim religion. Does that sound like British culture to you? So ultimately, this is an attack on what it means to be British. This is a takeover, and the radical left and our government are completely willing to ignore this national emergency for the sake of some virtue signalling. The same people that would not even be allowed to step foot in some of these countries that these people are fleeing, the same people protesting for the rights of these illegal immigrants, will eventually be the victim of what they once asked for. There has been an agenda in the modern world for some time now, maybe even 10 to 15 years. The agenda in the UK is rife. We're supposed to be accepting and inclusive to everybody, even if it leads to our own destruction. And we have to let it happen with a smile on our face. The British people are marketed to feel guilt in every way you can think, and that leads back to even the 80s, where we were force-fed images of starving countries in Africa by various charity bodies. But the point is, us Brits are pretty charitable, and this is easily exploited. We are constantly told that more people of colour should be in higher positions to ensure proper equality, and having white people at the head of certain companies or institutions is somehow bad, and as a result there are certain quotas that have been set to increase diversity all across the country. My question is why? Why is this a demand? Is it a bad thing to have a person that is white to be in a higher role if this is a majority white country? If I went to Nigeria, I wouldn't expect to see a majority black country push for more white people in high paying jobs, or in any Asian country, or pretty much anywhere else in the world. So it begs the question, is the narrative that is being pushed, is it a bad thing to be white? If it isn't, then what is the point in shoehorning the wrong person for the wrong position? Surely the most qualified person should get the job, not the most diverse. A society works best when it is one of meritocracy. There are a plethora of various products and companies that have performed significantly worse the more diversity, equity, inclusion programs have been catapulted into them. For example, the big story at the moment, Ubisoft. From the time period of 2021 to just 2025, they have lost over 85% of their stock value, which coincidentally coincides with their major push towards DEI within the company. This year there are speculations that they are at the beginning of a public U-turn on this strategy, but internally maybe not so much. Another example would be a British car company, Jaguar, which released a woke advert that was panned online. This led to an instant stock decline of 17%, and just for good measure, the BBC, or more specifically Doctor Who, a once British staple of the media here and beloved all around the world. While the show has been in serious decline since 2017, with most fans saying it ended in their eyes the same year. Well, the most recent series that boasts Kuti Gatwa, a Rwandan Scottish actor that is known for being gay, took up the role, with the show being written by controversial figure Russell T Davies, also known for being a gay man, but more importantly a big activist. Anyway, as you can imagine, the show was turned into a dumpster fire full of virtue signalling, white shaming and over the top gay scenes, as kind of a big middle finger to what was an incredibly devout audience of people that enjoyed the show since the 60s, and by alienating what was already a diminishing audience in the hopes of attracting the mystical modern audience, they ended up with no audience, and the show was essentially cancelled after just 2 seasons of Kuti Gatwa, so therefore he's no longer the Doctor. This season was the worst in history of the show, with the viewership declining by 80% in 10 years. So does the phrase go woke, go broke have any substance? Yes, absolutely. With the overwhelming evidence and case studies, it really is hard to explain the phenomenon away anymore. Wokeness is dying a slow, miserable death as the rise of normality is slowly becoming acceptable, and fatigue of these issues are kicking in for the vast silent majority, as once again they are managing to find their voices and speak up for their own culture, their own beliefs, and stop feeling shame, the same shame we are being told to feel. It's okay to be a person in your own country and feel pride in that. So to sum this all up, what the actual f*** is going on with the UK? Honestly, it feels like this country has been put on a conveyor belt straight to disaster, and no one in power seems willing to hit the brakes. We've got a government more interested in appeasing activists than helping the working people that actually make this country run. We've got freedom of speech being eroded by the day, regular people being arrested for edgy tweets while actual extremists walk free. We have thousands of people arriving here illegally, getting handed free accommodation, free healthcare, legal aid, and all funded by you and me, the taxpayer. What makes it worse is the complete lack of accountability. Every time Labour screws something, they just blame the last government, as if that excuses them from making it even worse. And when anyone dares to speak out, they're shut down, demonised, or in some cases even arrested. But here's the thing, I genuinely believe change is coming. People are waking up to this. The silent majority are getting sick of being silent, whether it's through reform or another political movement. The appetite for change is growing fast. And it's not about hate, it's about self-respect. It's about wanting your country to work for its people again, not for foreign criminals, not for virtue signalling elites, and definitely not for some globalist agenda. The UK can be great again, but it's going to take a serious cultural shift, one where we stop apologising for simply existing, start standing up for basic truths, and demand better from those in charge. And honestly, at this point, how could it possibly get any worse? But anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, please smash like, comment and subscribe, and if you really liked it, then maybe check out my Patreon, where I'll be hosting all sorts of ways you can be directly involved in my creation process, and also see your name in every video going forward. But anyway, I'll see you on the next one, and bye bye.